What was supposed to be a couple of hours of fun at a little-known cave ended up turning into a tragedy when 4 young friends decided to go into Gollum's cave. Once in the cave, they decided to go into an underwater tunnel. In water over their heads and holding their breaths, the 4 young friends began swimming their way back out when disaster struck. White Mountain is located directly east of Brigham Young University, or BYU, in Provo, Utah. The Slide Canyon or White Mountain Trail leads to a large block Y located 1 mile from a parking area at the mountain's base. It sits 1,074 feet, or 327 meters high. This hillside ladder was first built in 1906, using rock and limestone as the insignia for BYU. At 380 feet long and 130 feet wide, the Y is larger than the letters of the Hollywood sign. For years, the trail to the Y has been one of the most hiked and provides a scenic view of Provo and the rest of the cities in Utah Valley and Utah Lake. The trail is also regularly used by hikers, bikers, and hunters to access the backcountry in the Slide Canyon area. Hiking to the Y is a popular activity for BYU students and locals going for a walk or a jog. Most BYU students end up hiking the Y at least once during their time in school, either on a date or for one of the university's Light the Y events. One thing both students and locals know is that White Mountain is littered with caves. Each cave has its own unique layout. One of these caves was nicknamed Gollum's Cave after the Lord of the Rings character. Many Provo officials never knew about this cave, which had water flowing out of it. Located in the foothills just northeast of the Seven Peaks Water Park, the cave had become a large hotspot in recent months among local youths and thrill seekers. Brent Whitaker, a student living in Orem, said locals have known about Gollum's Cave for years. The cave is believed to be man-made, or at least part of it, with one section having the layout of an old abandoned mine. A city parks employee investigated the site about a year prior while tracing some water coming down the mountainside. The opening at the time was about 9 by 12 inches, but it was opened wider to at least 3 feet across and somewhat obscured by scrub oak, brush, and a couple of boulders. The location of the cave seems to have spread via word of mouth, said Provo resident Brian Lamprey, who said he went into the cave about 3 weeks before the accident. You hear about it and it's sort of fascinating, almost like a movie type thing, an underwater expedition, kind of fascinating. The cave is an intriguing sight, a short dark entrance nestled into the mountainside. Brandon Christensen found it by accident, but never truly went inside. A former BYU student said the cave was known to college students as early as 1997. Those familiar with the hidden cave said they had to squeeze through a small opening and then crawl on their hands and knees through a shallow pool of frigid water. The main tunnel then forks. Near the end of the left fork is a 2-foot diameter puddle that's actually a portal to the submerged passageway below the surface. The entrance to the passageway is around 90 feet inside the cave. If you submerge yourself in the frigid water, there's a passage about 3 to 4 feet high and 15 feet long that leads to another room where you can emerge. So once a person enters the water, they will then swim in 4 feet of water surrounded by nothing but rock and follow the rope to a small cavern at the other end. Hikers who have visited the cave say there is a rope that runs the length of the underwater tunnel to help swimmers get through safely. One end is tied to a rock at the entrance, and the other to a log in the small second chamber. The rope allows explorers to pull themselves along the tunnel, but if they lose the rope, the danger level rises, especially if the normally clear water becomes clouded by sediment stirred up from the floor by explorers swimming through the tunnel. The cavern at the far end of the tunnel measures 6 feet 6 inches at its highest point. It's not an easy swim, and the tunnel has a lot of silt and sediment that can quickly reduce the visibility in the water to 0. This will lead to the series of unfortunate events to come. For decades, the water-trickling hole sat unnoticed behind a pocket of nondescript trees on Provo's White Mountain. hidden to all but a few. But that changed on August 17, 2005, when 5 friends in Provo, Utah, Ariel Singer, Jennifer Galbraith, Blake Donner, Scott McDonald, and Stephen Hundley were at dinner when one of the girls, Jennifer, began talking about a cave on White Mountain, which she had previously been to. Jennifer was dating Donner, the lead singer of a local band named Parallax. Donner's cousin, Max Robinson, said that the band had performed that Wednesday night in a Provo cafe called Ironic Ashes and was preparing to cut an album. Jennifer mentioned how the water was so cold she almost passed out from the frightening experience, yet still made it out safely. The group became curious about the cave, as most have heard of it but haven't been inside. When the underwater passage was mentioned, the group then jokingly dubbed the Cave of Death. Hundley was the most experienced one of them, since he had been to the cave multiple times, but said that although he wanted to go to the cave with his friends, he had work in the morning, so he declined to go. After Hundley left, the 4 friends decided to go to the cave for a quick dip in the water and to see the cavern on the other side of the passage. On their way to the cave, they decided to call another friend and fellow musician, Joseph Ferguson, to join them, since he's never been to the cave. The group got to the entrance of the cave at around 3:30 a.m., with Joseph joining them a short time later. A bit after 4:30 a.m., the group entered the cave. During the initial crawl into the cave, Joseph didn't feel comfortable with the planned dive and decided not to go into the water. The other 4 entered the water and made their way through the passage. Ferguson felt a tug on the guide rope that signaled the other 4 had made it safely through the passage to the cavern on the other side. That would be the last contact he had with them. Ferguson went back up and left the cave to wait for the others outside. After about 45 minutes, Ferguson became concerned when his friends didn't emerge from the cave. He then called friends familiar with the cave, including Hundley, and asked them what to do. Ferguson waited before calling the police. He called the police at 6:25 a.m. When police got to the location, an extensive rescue and recovery effort was initiated. Provo Search and Rescue, police and fire personnel were on the scene almost immediately, but crews were cautious because of the extremely dangerous nature of the cave, with its confined spaces and the underwater passage. To make sure no one else went in, 4 rescuers stayed near the entrance to the cave. Before entering the water and making their way to the cavern at the back of the cave, emergency crews used pumps to drain about 6 inches of water out of the submerged passage and began pumping oxygen into the cave to provide air for the victims in case they were alive and running out of air. The pump lowered the water level by 2 feet, allowing them to safely enter and begin the search. Several emergency agencies were involved, including Provo Police, the Fire Mountain Rescue Team, Utah County Search and Rescue, and the Department of Public Safety Dive Team, along with the Orem Fire Department Hazardous Material Unit. However, due to the emergency crews being unfamiliar with the layout of the cave, the crew said that they had to be careful, slow, and methodical so as to not endanger the lives of the rescuers. It was nearly 4 hours from the time of the call to police before searchers discovered the first body in the underground tunnel at around 9:45 a.m. They found the second victim, a man, submerged on the tunnel floor, and the 2 remaining victims were found floating further back in the tunnel. They were recovered 3 hours later. They were all facing the same direction. Rescuers believe, based on the position of the bodies, the group ran into trouble while trying to swim back to exit the cavern, and that the first body found, that of a female, might have blocked the way for the other 3 as they tried to get out. Reports circulated that the rope, secured on both ends of the underwater passage in the cave, had broken, but those reports were false. Rescuers found the rope intact. Police said the men were only dressed in shorts and sandals, and the women wore shorts, shirts, and tennis shoes. 2 flashlights, apparently the only equipment the group brought with them, were found in the water, one floating and one submerged. Lit and unlit candles were scattered around the cave to provide lighting. The rescuers took all precautions to avoid accidents, using gas and oxygen sensors, wearing wetsuits, and carrying supplied air in small containers. Brian Lamprey recalled the time when he got disoriented and missed the hole that serves as the tunnel's entrance. "I had the same experience," Lamprey said. "I didn't realize that I overshot the hole. You kick up dirt on the bottom and the water becomes totally cloudy. If you're not holding the rope, you can get lost." Lamprey hit a wall 4 feet past the hole before overshooting it again on his way back, hitting his head twice on the tunnel's roof and racing back to the cavern on the other side for some air. He tried again and found the hole to exit safely. "It was so cloudy," he recalled. "Even with an underwater flashlight, you couldn't see a thing." kicking up the dirt and the water becomes cloudy so you can't see a thing. Yeah, I definitely knew I wouldn't bring people to swim that hole. I went to the other caves where there wasn't any water. As workers closed the opening of the cave, with hands on their heads holding back tears, the expressions and body language of a group of friends of the 4 who died said it all. They never said a word on camera, but their raw emotions spoke volumes. Friends of the victims, about a dozen of them, trying to comfort one another in the face of an unthinkable loss. They held out hope and counseled one another until word came and their fears were realized. All 4 had died inside the cave nicknamed the Cave of Death. After retrieving the bodies were transported late Thursday morning to a Provo morgue in order for families of the victims to identify their loved ones. The bodies would then be taken to the state medical examiner's office for autopsies. A preliminary report from the state medical examiner's office lists the causes of death as drowning. By late afternoon, Gollum's cave was permanently closed, but the deaths generated national headlines and pledges from officials to close not only Gollum's cave, but also others in the region. Some protested and said that sealing the caves didn't make much sense. There are more caves in Utah than we know, says Chuck Acklin, vice chairman of the Utah County's chapter of the National Speleological Society. Sealing off all of the mines makes sense, but the caves, there's a lot of science in those caves that we haven't understood yet. Within days after crews had sealed the lethal cavern, gates greeted novice adventurers at a handful of popular caves, including Nutty Putty west of Utah Lake, before it was eventually closed down. Just like the eventful fate of Nutty Putty, the sealed entrance of Gollum's cave became dedicated to the 4 people who died inside. 2 friends of one of the victims came to remember their friend, leaving hand marks in the still wet concrete. They say it's their way to pay their respects. So, what exactly happened in the blackness of the watery passage? Rescuer Chris Reed records in his log what most experts believed happened. The friends swam one after another through the tunnel, only to be greeted by bad air in the small chamber. A sensor measured the oxygen concentration in the cavern at only 19%. Oxygen starved, the 4 then struggled to swim back out of the murky passage and passed out and drowned before reaching the exit. Toxicology reports later show that none of the 4 had any substances in their body. Before Thursday, there were 3 recorded cave deaths in Utah. In the early 1900s, a scout leader not wearing a helmet died after falling on his head in Logan Cave. Late in 2002, a woman died from a fall of more than 240 feet in Bloomington Cave near St. George. And in 2003, a man drowned in the warm spring of Beware Cave near Gandy in Millard County. A few years later, a few of the caves would reopen, including Nutty Putty, before John Edward Jones infamously went into the cave and got trapped upside down for 28 hours before dying. Just like Nutty Putty, Gollum's cave remains sealed to this day. Thank you for watching.